The air in the Galactic Council chamber was always cold. It was a dry, sterile chill, meant to be comfortable for the many different kinds of life that sat in the tall, curved seats. Light came from everywhere and nowhere, softly glowing on smooth, gray metal. In the center of the huge room was a wide, empty circle. That was where species stood to be judged. Today it was humanity's turn. Park Yuna stood in that circle. She was the main human diplomat. She wore a simple, dark suit. Her hands were clasped tightly behind her back so no one could see them shake. Around her, in tiers that reached high into the shadowy ceiling, were the counselors. There were hundreds of them. Some were tall and thin, with skin like polished stone. Others were shrouded in mist or had many clicking limbs. Their eyes, or what passed for eyes, were all fixed on her. At the highest point sat Counselor Vale. He was one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His body looked like it was carved from clear, pale crystal. Inside, soft lights pulsed slowly, like a slow, cold heartbeat. He did not need to speak out loud. His voice came directly into the minds of everyone present. It was a voice like grinding ice. The petition for full membership is now concluded. Vale's thought voice echoed. The Council has reviewed 103 years of human probation. We have observed. Yuna took a shallow breath. The artificial air was thin. Your species is curious, Vale continued. A holographic image appeared above the circle. It showed humans helping to build a starbase. Then it changed to humans caring for alien plants on a damaged world. You show moments of cooperation, but these are exceptions. They are not your nature. The image shifted. Now it showed old videos from Earth's history. Wars, crowds shouting, polluted skies. Then it showed more recent things. A human ship breaking a trade agreement, a loud argument in a smaller council meeting. Your flaws are fundamental, said Vale. The cold voice held no anger. It was worse than anger. It held certainty. Emotional volatility. You are ruled by feelings, not logic.
Territorial gra.
You fight over the smallest pieces of land, even among yourselves. Technological mediocrity. Every machine you have built, we built better centuries ago. You have nothing new to offer. Yuna's mouth felt dry. Counselor, she said, her own voice sounding small in the vast quiet. Those images, they are pieces of a whole. They are not our full story. We have learned. We have grown. Growth is not enough. Another counselor's voice buzzed. This one was insect-like. Stability is required. Predictability. Your species is neither. You are like children, Vale said, the thought voice softening in a way that felt like a knife. Bright children sometimes, but children who cannot be trusted with sharp tools. Or with the keys to the wider galaxy. The hologram above Yuna changed one last time. It now showed the official seal of the Galactic Council. Next to it, a new symbol appeared. A small, blue-green planet, Earth, cradled by two curved, protective hands. Therefore, Vale announced, and the word felt final, like a door slamming shut. The Council votes to affirm the status of Homo sapiens as a protected species. Effective immediately. A low hum filled the chamber as the hundreds of counselors registered their agreement. It was not a vote. The vote had happened earlier in private. This was just the announcement. Protected species. The words burned in Yuna's ears. Sounded nice. It was not nice. It was a prison sentence. It meant humanity would be observed, managed, and limited. They could not have their own deep space ships. They could not vote on galactic laws. They would need permission for things other species could do freely. They were being put in a box for their own good, forever. No, Yuna said, the word bursting from her. You cannot do this. This is not protection. This is disgrace. It is for your safety, and for the safety of others, Vale replied. The lights inside his crystal form pulsed calmly. Your system will be monitored by Council peacekeeper vessels. Your people will be guided by our appointed advisors. In time, you may come to see the wisdom of this. The wisdom? Yuna's control broke. Her hands came forward, clenched into fists. You judge us by our worst past and ignore our present. You see emotion as a weakness, but it is what drives us to create, to care, to improve. You call us mediocre because we do not copy your paths, but we find our own. Her voice echoed and then died, swallowed by the enormous, silent room. Vale's form seemed to shift slightly. It was a sigh. This display only proves the point, Diplomat Park. Your passion is noted, and it is precisely why you are not ready. The seal in the hologram flashed brightly. The decision was locked. The broadcast was being sent across the galactic network. Every species on every connected world would now know humanity was a child species. Project. A problem to be managed. The session is ended, Vale said. The lights in the chamber brightened, signaling dismissal. The various counselors began to rise, their forms moving toward exits. None looked at Yuna in the circle. She was already part of the furniture. A piece of a resolved issue. She stood there, alone in the sudden, busy emptiness, the cold air biting deeper. The protective hands around Earth on the hologram seemed now to be made of iron. Far away, on the moon of Earth, in a small observation room of Lunar Research Station Sagan, Lee Hanul watched the broadcast end. The screen went dark, reflecting her own face back at her. She had dark, calm eyes and hair tied back simply. She did not move. Next to her, her brother, Kim Tae-hyun, slammed his hand down on the console. "Ego," he muttered. A mix of anger and hopelessness in the old Korean word. Protected species. They might as well have called us pets. Or insects. Hanul did not react. She just kept looking at the dark screen. "Did you hear him?" Tae-hyun went on, pacing in the small room. "Emotional volatility?"
Territorial gra.
He made us sound like angry monkeys. And technological mediocrity? We built this station. We untangled the quantum drive specs they gifted us in half the time they predicted. "He is not wrong," Hanul said quietly. Her voice was soft, but it stopped Taehyun's pacing. "What? Uni, how can you say that?" "About the technology," she clarified, finally turning her head to look at him. "We are good at learning their tools. We are excellent at using what they give us. But have we ever given them something they did not already have? Something truly new? Not a better version. Something different." Taehyun opened his mouth, then closed it. He ran a hand through his hair. "That's not the point. The point is they're putting a fence around the whole solar system. The fence was always there." "Taehyun, Hanul said. She stood up from her chair. "We just could not see it before. Now it is very clear." She walked across the room to a wide window that looked out on the lunar surface. Beyond the jagged gray horizon, the half-disk of Earth hung in the blackness, beautiful and distant. Soon, Council peacekeeper ships would be hanging in orbit around it. A reminder. "What do we do?" Taehyun asked, his anger fading into tiredness. Hanul did not answer right away. Her gaze drifted away from Earth, past the busy docking ports of the station, to a smaller, older module attached to the main hub. It was the Xenolinguistics lab. Her lab. It was where she studied not just alien languages, but the very roots of how galactic civilizations communicated. A thought, quiet and precise, formed in her mind. It was not about fighting. It was not about shouting. The council had just shown that human shouting changed nothing. Her eyes settled on a small, unremarkable object sitting on her cluttered desk. It was a data drive, given to her years ago by her old mentor Choi Miho when he retired. It was labeled simply, "Archive Fragments, Pre-Council Era." She had looked at it before. It was full of confusing, broken patterns of data that the Council's own scholars called cosmic static. Useless noise from before the Council existed. But what if it wasn't noise? "We do what we have always done," Hanul said, her voice still quiet, but now with a thread of something new in it, something focused. "We look closer." She turned from the window and walked to her desk. She picked up the small data drive. It was cool and light in her hand. "We look closer," she repeated, more to herself than to her brother, "at the things they have forgotten, or the things they never understood in the first place." Outside the window, against the endless dark, the earth glowed with the soft, blue light of home. A home that was now officially a nursery, a cage. Lee Hanul held the data drive and made a silent promise. They had disgraced all of humanity with a single ruling. Perhaps the answer was not in the roar of a crowd, but in a single, perfect, understood word. The silence after the judgment was not peaceful. It was heavy, like a thick blanket smothering Earth and all its colonies. Official protests were filed by the human government. They were acknowledged by the council with a simple, automated message and then ignored. On the networks, humans expressed their anger, their shame, their fierce arguments. But out among the stars, the gears of the new order began to turn with quiet, efficient speed. Within days, the council peacekeeper vessels arrived. They did not come in war fleets. That would have been a show of respect, a recognition of possible threat. They came in small, clean, shimmering ships that took position in high orbit around Earth and Mars. They were like watchful parents standing at the door of a room where a troublesome child played. On Lunar Station Sagan, life changed in small, sharp ways. Park Yuna arrived from the council chambers. Her official title was now Liaison to Protected Humanity. It was a job meant to keep her busy and quiet. Her main duty was to relay the council's guidelines to human authorities. She moved through the station's bright white hallways with a datapad always in her hands. But her eyes were tired. Lee Hanul watched it all from the quiet of her lab. She saw the change in people. Engineers like her brother Taehyun walked with their shoulders hunched, their voices lower. A project to modify a cargo hauler's engine was put on hold, waiting for a council permit that might never come. The spark of invention, the joy of building something new, was being replaced by the slow, careful work of following instructions. Hanul did not join the angry discussions in the mess hall. She did not add her voice to the loud debates on the networks. Instead, she spent every waking hour in her lab. The small data drive from her mentor was now plugged into her main console. On the large screen, chaotic patterns of light and symbol flickered. The file was labeled Cosmic Background Linguistic Artifact, Fragment 7. The Council's own archives marked it as janitorial. For historical completeness only. To everyone else, it was noise. Static from the birth of the universe. But Hanul was a xenolinguist. She did not hear noise. She heard patterns. Or rather, the ghost of a pattern. It was like trying to hear a single voice in a storm. The problem was access. The oldest data, the truly interesting fragments, were kept in the restricted levels of the Galactic Archive. Only full council species or researchers with special approval could study them. As a member of a protected species, Hanul's access was now limited to public information, children's books for the galaxy. She needed help. She found Park Yuna in the station's small observation deck, staring at the cold stars. Yuna looked older than she had just weeks before. "Liaison Park," Hanul said softly. Yuna turned. A faint, weary smile touched her lips. "Just Yuna, please. The title is part of the decoration." She gestured out the window toward the faint, silvery speck of a council peacekeeper ship. "Like that?" Hanul nodded. She came to stand beside Yuna, following her gaze. "They see us as a problem to be solved. A messy, emotional equation they need to simplify. They see us as we were 100 years ago," Yuna said, bitterness finally coloring her voice. "They took our worst moments and froze them in time. We are not allowed to be anything else." "What if?" Hanul began, choosing her words with care. "We showed them something they have never seen before. Not a better engine. Not a louder argument. Something older." Yuna looked at her, curiosity cutting through the tiredness. "What do you mean?" Hanul explained. She talked about the data fragments, the patterns in the cosmic noise that the council dismissed as prehistory, irrelevant to a modern, ordered galaxy. She did not say she thought it was a language. That felt too big, too impossible. Instead, she called it an untranslated complex signal. "I think there is structure there," Hanul said. "If I could just access the deeper archives, the older samples, I could perform a proper analysis. As a linguistic exercise, It would be pure research. No weapons. No politics. Just translation. Yuna was silent for a long time. She watched the peacekeeper ship. They will say no. Any request from me or from any human for higher access will be denied. They think our curiosity is dangerous. Then we do not ask, Hanul said. Yuna's eyes widened slightly. Your liaison codes, Hanul continued, her voice still calm and low. They give you access to the administrative network. For submitting reports, you could submit a routine request for a cultural research addendum. Use an old, approved case number from before the judgment. Bury the data access request inside 20 pages of bureaucratic language. They scan human requests for keywords like weapon or engine. They will not look for philological analysis of archival noise. It was a huge risk. If they were caught, Yuna's career would be over. She might be removed from her post, sent back to Earth in further disgrace. Yuna turned fully from the window, studying Hanul's face. Why? Why does this matter so much? We have bigger problems. They are putting fences around our ships, our science, our future. Because the fence is their language, Hanul said, and for the first time, a flicker of passion showed in her dark eyes. Their rules, their technology, their superiority, it is all built on a way of thinking, a way of seeing the universe. We are trying to shout at them in a language they invented. They will always win that game. She held up her data drive. But this is not their language. This is something else. If we can learn it, even a little, we are not inside their fence anymore. We are standing on different ground. Yuna looked from Hanul's earnest face to the cold, silent ship in the distance. She thought of the counselor's grinding voice, so sure of itself. She thought of the protective hands around Earth, made of rules and condescension. She let out a long, slow breath. Okay, she said. Okay, I will write the request. The most boring, routine, bureaucratic request in history. And we will see if the janitors of the galaxy are paying attention. The request was sent. Days passed. Then a week. There was no approval. But there was also no denial. In the labyrinth of council systems, the request had slipped through. One morning, a notification appeared on Hanul's console. Access granted, Level 2 Historical Archives. It was a low level, but it was deeper than she had ever been. She immersed herself. The files were massive, chaotic, and poorly organized. It was clear the council valued the present and the future. The past was a dusty closet they rarely opened. Hanul sifted through recordings of dead stars, the gravitational echoes of black holes, the faint, residual heat from the universe's first moments. And there, woven through it all, were the patterns. She began to see it. It was not a written language like Korean or English. It was not even like the symbolic math logic the council used. This was different. A shimmer in the data here corresponded to the concept of connection. A specific frequency pattern meant question. It was a language built not on words for things, but on words for the relationships between things. It described gravity not as a force, but as a long-distance conversation. It described light as a memory shared at full speed. It was beautiful, and it was fundamentally alien to the council's way of thinking. They used the universe. This language spoke to it. Taehyun brought her meals she often forgot to eat. He would find her asleep at her console, the gentle light of the ancient patterns playing across her face. He did not fully understand her work, but he understood her focus. He kept others away. One night, as he placed a bowl of warm soup next to her, he nodded at the screen. Any luck, Uni? Or is it all just more noise? Hanul leaned back, her eyes sore. She pointed to a complex, swirling visual on the screen. See this? The Council's science database calls this phenomenon quantum fluctuation set S7. A problem to be solved, a fluctuation to be stabilized. She pulled up another window showing her notes. A simple, elegant symbol glowed there. But in the pattern, it is not a problem. It is a word. The closest translation is a breath being held. Taehyun blinked. A breath? That's poetry, not science. Is it? Hanul asked quietly. What if the universe does not know the difference? She looked at her brother, then back at the symbols. The council had disgraced humanity for being imperfect, for being emotional, for being irrational. They saw the universe as a machine to be mastered. But what if the universe was not a machine? What if it was a story? And for the first time in 1,000 years, someone was trying to read it. The station was sleeping. The main lights in the corridors were dimmed to a soft blue night cycle. The only sounds were the low hum of air recyclers and the distant, faint vibrations from the station's power core. In the Xenolinguistics lab, however, light glowed steady and warm. Lee Hanul was not sleeping. She sat before her console, but her eyes were closed. On the screens around her, the ancient patterns danced swirls of light that represented cosmic events, shimmering lines that translated to concepts like distance and memory. She was not looking at them anymore. She was listening. For weeks, she had treated the patterns like a puzzle. She mapped symbols. She built a glossary. She cross-referenced the patterns with known physical laws. It was hard, careful work, but it felt like she was studying the skeleton of a creature without understanding its breath, its life. Something was missing. The answer came from a memory. She remembered her grandfather, years ago on Earth, teaching her how to listen to the wind in the old pine trees behind his house. Don't just hear the noise, Hanula, he had said, his voice rough and kind. Listen for the space between the sounds. That's where the tree is talking. The space between the sounds. Her eyes snapped open. She had been looking at the symbols, the direct data points. But what about the gaps? The silence between the recorded cosmic events? She called up a massive file, a simple recording of what the council called void space static. The empty, quiet places between galaxies where almost nothing happened. To their sensors, it was blank. Useless. Hanul told the computer to remove everything the council defined as a signal. All that was left was nothing, a visual representation of pure silence. It showed up on her screen as a flat, dark field. But then she asked the computer to analyze that nothing not for sound, but for shape, for pattern in its pure, undisturbed state. Slowly, like a ghost image emerging in a dark room, a structure appeared on the dark field. It was faint, unbelievably complex, and perfectly ordered. It was not made of the symbols she had collected. It was the framework that held the symbols together. It was the grammar of the silence itself. Her heart began to beat faster. This was it. The council's science looked at the universe and saw objects. Stars, planets, particles. They built tools to manipulate those objects. This ancient framework saw the universe and saw relationships. The silence wasn't empty. It was the canvas. A star wasn't just a ball of fire. It was a sustained chord in a much larger song. They didn't just not understand it. They were looking in the wrong direction entirely. She needed to talk to someone who thought in a different way. She needed her old mentor. Early the next station morning, she sent a tight beam communication to Earth. Not to a government office, but to a small, isolated house on the coast of Jeju Island. The connection was slow and secure. After a few moments, the screen resolved into the face of an old man with wise, crinkled eyes and a head of soft white hair. Choi Miho. Hanul, he said, his voice scratchy but warm. My best student. I heard about the decision. His smile was sad. I am sorry. Thank you, Professor, Hanul said, bowing her head slightly. But I am not calling about that. I am calling about your gift. She held up the old data drive. Miho's eyes sharpened. The gentle old man faded, replaced by the fierce, brilliant physicist she had studied under. Ah, the janitorial files. You have looked at them. I have. You told me once they were the leftover pieces of a much bigger toy. What did you mean? He was quiet for a long moment, looking past the camera, as if seeing something else. The council, he began slowly. They are brilliant engineers, the best. They take a law of physics and they build a machine with it. They see a piece of the puzzle and they use it as a tool. But they never ask why the puzzle exists. He leaned forward. What did you find, Hanul? I found a framework, she said. Her words tumbled out as she explained the patterns, the grammar of the silence. It's not a technology, Professor. It's a language, but not for speaking to beings. It's a language for describing reality in its own terms. On the screen, Choi Miho's face broke into a wide, astonished grin. It was the look he used to get when a student grasped a difficult truth. Yes, he whispered. Yes, they don't understand it. They can't. To them, the universe is a machine to be taken apart. But you are seeing it as a conversation. But what do I do with it? Hanul asked, her calm breaking for the first time. I can describe a star as a sustained chord. It is beautiful, but it does not change anything. The Council's ships are still in our sky. Do you play an instrument, Hanul? Miho asked, his head tilting. She was confused. No, professor. A pity. It is a good lesson. If you know the notes of a song, you can write them down. That is science. But if you understand the song, you can play it. And if you can play it, you can change the key. You can adjust the tempo. His eyes were blazing now. They have pieces of the song, Hanul. They found scraps of this framework long ago. They use it like a child uses a single key on a piano, pounding it to make one sound over and over. That is the basis of their faster-than-light drive. They press the distance key. They do not know the melody it belongs to. The idea was so huge it made the room feel small. The greatest secret of the galaxy, the foundation of the Council's power, was a fragment of something they did not comprehend. A button they pushed without reading the manual. So they are not masters, Hanul said, the realization dawning. They are button pushers. Very advanced, very clever button pushers, Miho corrected, but his tone was delighted. They built a glorious palace on a foundation they never examined. And they think everyone else should live in mud huts because they cannot see the blueprints for the palace. His expression grew serious. You must be careful, Hanul. If you show them you can read the blueprints, they will be frightened. And frightened powers are dangerous. What should I do? Learn the song, he said simply. Not just a note. Learn a whole phrase. Then, if you must show them, do not show them you can build a bigger palace. Show them you can hear the music theirs is built upon. It is a different kind of power. One they do not have. The communication ended. Hanul sat in the quiet of her lab. The screens still showed the ghostly framework of the silent voids. It was no longer just a linguistic curiosity. It was a lens, a new way to see everything. Taehyun found her there later, staring not at the screen, but at her own hands. Uni, you look like you've seen a ghost. She looked up at him. Not a ghost. The opposite. She stood up. I need you to do something for me. I need a very quiet, very isolated signal generator. Something that can produce complex, stable waveforms in the ultra-low frequency range. Not to send a message, just to hum a tune. Taehyun, the engineer, immediately started thinking about parts and specifications. I can cobble that together from calibration gear in Storage Bay 3. No one will miss it. But why? What are you humming to? Hanul smiled, a small, private smile. To the universe, Taehyun. I think it's time we said hello properly. And listened for the echo. News traveled on the station like air through the vents. The counselor was coming. Not just any counselor, but Vale himself. His crystal shuttle, a sleek dagger of light, docked with the main hub with a silence that felt more imposing than any noise. It was called a goodwill inspection. Everyone knew what it really was. A warden checking on his newest charges. A forced quiet fell over Station Sagan. Crew members stood straighter in the halls, their faces blank. Work on human projects slowed or stopped completely. The peacekeeper ships in orbit seemed to watch a little more closely. Lee Hanul received a formal message on her console. It was from Park Yuna, but it used official language. All senior research personnel are requested to attend a gathering in the primary observatory at 1400 hours. Counselor Vale wishes to observe human dedication to peaceful study. It was not a request. Hanul read the message twice. Then she looked at the other window open on her screen. It showed a simple, elegant waveform, a phrase she had constructed from the ancient framework. It wasn't a sentence with meaning. It was more like a tuning fork, a perfect set of relationships that asked a gentle, open-ended question of the cosmos. Her brother Taehyun had built the small emitter for her. It was currently hidden in a disconnected service panel in her lab, inert and waiting. She had not planned to do anything with it. Not yet. She was still learning. But now Vale was here, in the heart of their small, caged world, to observe them. That a cold, clear feeling settled in her stomach. This was not the right time. It was too soon, too risky. And yet, the thought of standing silently before him, just another human to be inspected, felt like a betrayal of everything she had discovered. At 1,350 hours, she left her lab. She did not take a datapad. She did not bring notes. She wore her simple gray researcher's uniform. The only unusual thing she did was pause by the service panel, her fingers brushing the cold metal. Then she walked to the observatory. The large, circular room was full of light from the wide viewports that showed the majestic curve of Earth and the blackness of space. Dozens of the station's top scientists and engineers stood in a loose half-circle. They were nervous. In the center of the room stood Counselor Vale. In person, his crystalline form was both beautiful and chilling. The soft internal lights pulsed slowly. His presence was a dry, mental pressure against their minds. Park Yuna stood slightly to his side, her face a careful mask of professional calm. Vale was speaking, his thought voice filling the room without effort. Admirable in its way. He was saying, his attention on a display showing a human-designed water recycler. Your persistence with incremental improvements. It shows a patience that is new for your species. Perhaps there is hope for managed progress. The human scientists nodded, their eyes on the floor or the walls. No one spoke. The insult was wrapped in a compliment, and it was more painful than outright scorn. Vale turned, his faceless head seeming to sweep over the group. But it confirms the core issue. You work within the systems you are given. You polish the tools we invented. Where is the spark of true novelty? The leap of understanding that defines a mature species? The silence was heavy and hot with shame. Then, a voice spoke. It was quiet, but clear in the vast room. Would the counselor like to see something novel? Every head turned. Lee Hanul had taken a small step forward from the back of the group. Her hands were clasped loosely in front of her. Her expression was calm, but her dark eyes were fixed on Vale. Yuna's mask of calm cracked for a second, showing pure alarm. Taehyun, standing with the engineers, stiffened. Vale's internal lights flickered, a sign of mild surprise. He had not expected to be addressed, certainly not in this tone. You are a researcher here? His voice grated in their minds. Lee Hanul. Xenolinguistics.
Lingaistics. Valrepeated.
The word carried a faint hint of amusement. The study of chatter, of noise. What novelty can there be in that? We have had a universal translator for millennia. You have a device that matches one set of symbols to another, Hanul said. Her voice was still soft, but it carried. That is not understanding. That is substitution. A ripple went through the room. She was correcting him. Vale took a slow, smooth step toward her. The mental pressure increased. You suggest your understanding is superior? I suggest, Hanul said, choosing each word as if placing a stone on a scale, that there are languages we have not yet tried to hear. Languages older than symbols. May I demonstrate? This was the moment. This was the cliff's edge. Yuna looked terrified. Taehyun held his breath. Vale was silent for a long moment. The room waited. He was curious in the way a person might be curious about an ant building an unusual mound. Cost him nothing to watch. Demonstrate, he agreed. Show me this human novelty. Hanul did not move to a console. She did not call up a screen. She simply nodded. The demonstration requires a question. An old question from your own scientific archives. One that has no answer in council science. This was a gamble. She was using the access Yuna had granted her. Ask. Vale said, now clearly intrigued by the theater of it. Hanul took a slow breath. She thought of the silent framework, the grammar of the void. She needed a question that was not about an object, but about a relationship, about silence itself. She spoke the title of an old, famously unsolved council thesis. What is the true nature of the cosmic voids, the empty spaces between the strands of the galactic web? A murmur went through the human scientists. It was a famous, almost philosophical problem. The voids were not just empty space. They were impossibly large, impossibly quiet, and seemingly violated some minor energy principles. Council science called it the Great Silence. It was a hole in their perfect map. Vale's lights pulsed faster. You choose a question that has puzzled superior minds for ages. A performance of arrogance. How will you demonstrate an answer? With a lecture? A new theory scribbled on a screen? No, Hanul said. She closed her eyes. The room was utterly still. She was not concentrating on the crowd or on Vale. She was thinking of the framework. She was thinking of the tuning fork phrase. She was thinking of the void not as emptiness, but as the canvas, the breath between notes. She lifted her right hand. In the bright light of the observatory, she raised her index finger. It was a simple, almost meaningless gesture, but she began to move it slowly, deliberately through the air. She was not writing. She was tracing, following the shape of a relationship, the silent phrase from the ancient framework. A phrase that asked, gently, what is the nature of your stillness? As her finger moved, a faint, shimmering line of light appeared in the air in front of her, hanging where she traced. It was not a hologram from a projector. It was light pulled from the very air, condensing like mist on a cold window. It was made of Cherenkov radiation and warped spacetime, a side effect of the phrase being spoken correctly. The symbols were beautiful and complex, glowing with soft gold and blue. She did not draw them for the audience. She drew them for the universe. And she whispered a single word, not in Korean, not in any council tongue, but in the oldest language of all. A word that meant listen. In her lab, hidden in the wall, the small emitter activated for a single, precise microsecond. It broadcast the tuned phrase not as a radio wave, but as a patterned fluctuation in the local quantum field. A ripple in reality itself. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, every sensor on the station, gravity, electromagnetic, subspace, spiked and went wild. Alarms were instantly silenced by the station's confused computer. On the main observatory screen, which had been showing a view of deep space, the image changed. It showed the local starfield. And then, from the direction of the nearest cosmic void, a wave of color blossomed. It was not light that could be seen with eyes. It was data translated into visual form. A perfect, harmonic, resonant pattern echoed back. It matched the structure of Hanul's drawn symbols, but expanded them, completed them. It was an answer. The void was not empty. It was listening, and it had just replied. The shimmering symbols in the air faded. Hanul lowered her finger. She opened her eyes. The screen showed the echoing pattern, slowly fading. The sensor logs were a mess of impossible, beautiful data. No one moved. No one spoke. The human scientists stared, their mouths open. Taehyun's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. Park Yuna looked from the screen to Hanul, her professional mask gone, replaced by awe. Counselor Vale stood perfectly still. The steady, confident pulse of light inside his crystalline form had stopped. For the first time anyone had ever seen, the lights inside him were frozen. The mental pressure in the room was gone, replaced by a void of pure, stunned silence. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at Lee Hanul's hand, now resting peacefully at her side, at the single finger that had just asked the cosmos a question. And the cosmos had answered. The silence in the observatory was absolute. It was a thick, heavy thing, broken only by the low, steady hum of the station's life support. On the main view screen, the beautiful, impossible echo from the cosmic void faded slowly, like the last note of a song hanging in a hall. All eyes were on the center of the room. on Counselor Vale, who stood as still as the statue he resembled. The soft internal lights of his crystalline body were frozen mid-pulse, casting no rhythm, giving no sign of thought. And on Lee Hanul, who stood calmly a few paces away, her hand now resting at her side. Her face pale but composed. It was Park Yuna who moved first. She took a half-step forward, her training as a diplomat wrestling with her shock. She looked from the silent counselor to the stunned human scientists. Her mind raced. This was no longer an inspection. It was an event, a rupture. "Sensors," Yuna said, her voice surprisingly steady in the quiet. "Report. Confirm the data stream." A young technician at the observatory's control console jumped. His fingers flew over the panel. I am confirming," he stammered. All primary and secondary sensors registered an anomalous coherent pulse. Origin triangulated to the Virgo Void region. It was a direct response pattern to the energy signature generated in this room. He looked up, his eyes wide. "The pattern is not in any known registry. It's completely new." New. The word hung in the air. The word Counselor Vale had just said humanity was incapable of creating. The human scientists began to murmur, a wave of low, astonished whispers. They looked at Hanul not with understanding, but with a dawning, confused awe. She had not used a machine. She had not given a lecture. She had lifted a finger, drawn light from the air, and the universe itself had answered her. Slowly, the lights inside Counselor Vale began to pulse again. But the rhythm was wrong. It was jagged, uneven. The dry mental pressure returned to the room, but it was different now. It was not the calm weight of authority. It was the sharp, buzzing static of a shattered assumption. That he turned his faceless head toward Hanul. The grinding ice of his thought voice, when it came, was slower, measured. It carried a new, dangerous quality: uncertainty. "What?" he asked, each word forming deliberately in their minds. "Did you do?" Hanul met the space where his eyes would be. "I asked a question in a language the universe understands." And it replied. "That is not an explanation. It is mysticism." Vale's voice gained a little of its old edge. "What was the mechanism? What device did you employ?" "The only device was understanding," Hanul said. She gestured lightly toward the main screen, where the sensor data was still displayed. "Your archives contain the fragments of this language. You label it background noise, historical static. You use pieces of it." She paused, thinking of her mentor's words. "You have a key on a piano that makes a ship go faster. You press it, but you have never listened to the song the key belongs to." "I simply played a few notes of the song." "Preposterous." The thought voice was sharp now, almost loud. "Our science is the pinnacle of material understanding. We manipulate gravity and space-time as tools. And that is the difference," Hanul replied, her own voice gaining a gentle strength. "You see the universe as a collection of tools. I am learning to see it as a conversation. You shout commands at the tools. She looked at her finger. "I whispered a question to a partner." Vale took a step toward her. The humans in the room instinctively leaned back. But Hanul did not move. "You accessed restricted archives?" Vale accused, the buzzing pressure intensifying. From the side, Park Yuna spoke. Her voice was formal, clear. "Researcher Lee requested access for a standard philological study of pre-council historical data. Permission was granted through the proper cultural research channel. There were no security violations." She stood very straight. "The request was for linguistic analysis. Not weapons research, not physics. Linguistics." Vale ignored her. His focus was entirely on Hanul. "You claim this parlor trick is a language. Prove it. Do it again." Hanul shook her head slowly. "It is not a trick. And it is not a performing animal to jump on command. You asked for novelty, counselor. Not for a repeat of a known experiment. You just witnessed the first true dialogue with a cosmic void in recorded history. The data is there." She nodded to the screen. "You can choose to study it, or you can choose to be offended that the one who started the dialogue was a human. The challenge was quiet, but it filled the room. She was not boasting. She was stating a simple fact. The ball was now in his court. He could dismiss this as a trick, an accident, a fraud. But the sensor logs were clear, and they were already spreading through the station's network. Too many witnesses. The jagged pulsing in Vale's form slowed, settling into a new, tense rhythm. He was thinking, calculating. The humiliation was severe. He had come to inspect a docile, inferior species and had been shown a mystery that defied his own people's understanding. But a counselor did not lose control. A counselor adapted. He turned from Hanul, sweeping his gaze over the assembled humans. The grinding voice was forced back to its usual, calm authority, but a crack remained. This event, he announced, will be investigated. All data is to be secured. Researcher Lee will be available for questioning. It was an order, not a request. He was trying to regain the frame to make this a minor incident to be managed. Then Park Yuna did something remarkable. She stepped forward, placing herself physically between Vale and the rest of the room. "Of course, counselor," she said, her tone the perfect model of cooperative liaison. "Humanity is happy to provide all data from this unexpected scientific event. We would, of course, welcome a joint investigation. Given that the phenomenon relates to your historical archives and involves a fundamental question of your science, a cooperative effort would be most logical." She smiled a thin, professional smile. "After all, we are all seeking understanding, are we not?" She had just boxed him in. If he took over completely, he looked fearful, like he was covering up a human discovery that threatened him. If he agreed to a joint investigation, he had to treat humanity as a partner, not a patient. Vale's light pulsed once, hard. He looked at Yuna, then back at Hanul. The silent engineer, Kim Tae-hyun, had moved subtly to stand closer to his sister, his body tense. "A joint investigation," Vale's voice echoed, the words tasting bitter, "will be considered. This session is concluded." Without another word, he turned and glided from the observatory, his crystal form moving with a speed that betrayed his desire to be gone. The heavy door hissed shut behind him. For another moment, no one moved. Then, the room erupted into sound. Scientists crowded around the console, calling for the data. Others clustered together, speaking in excited, hushed shouts. Everyone looked at Hanul. She did not engage. She felt a wave of exhaustion so deep it made her bones ache. The act of shaping the phrase, of holding the framework in her mind, had taken more from her than she realized. Tae-hyun was at her side in an instant. "Uni, are you okay?" She nodded, giving him a small, tired smile. "I am okay." Park Yuna made her way through the crowd. Her professional mask was gone, replaced by an expression of fierce pride and worry. "Hanul," she said, lowering her voice. I have no words, but he is not finished. He will try to contain this." "I know," Hanul said softly. She looked at the screen, at the last traces of the void's beautiful reply. "But some things once seen cannot be unseen. Some questions, once asked, cannot be unasked." She looked at Yuna, then at her brother. "He came to disgrace us. He only succeeded in showing everyone that his map of the universe has missing pieces." She paused. "And that we can see the shape of what's missing." The news did not travel. It exploded. Counselor Vale's shuttle left Lunar Station Sagan within the hour, but it was too late. Sensor logs, visual recordings from the observatory, and the raw, beautiful data stream from the cosmic void were not just station records. They were the talk of a humiliated species that had just found its voice. Engineers shared them with friends on Mars. Astronomers sent them to colleagues on the orbital habitats. Within hours, the data packets had jumped to civilian networks on Earth itself by the time the Council's official statement was released. A dry message about anomalous sensor readings under review. The entire human population had already seen it. They saw Lee Hanul, a calm woman in a simple gray uniform, lift a single finger. They saw light bend to her will and form impossible symbols in the air. They saw the great, silent dark between galaxies light up with a reply. The story was not about technology. It was about a question and an answer. On the station, Hanul became a ghost in her own lab. Park Yuna and station security had to gently turn away a line of scientists, journalists, and officials who wanted to see her, talk to her, ask her how. Taehyun stood guard outside her door like a steadfast bear, his arms crossed. "She is resting," he said again and again, his voice firm. "You have the data. Look at that." Inside, Hanul was indeed resting, but her mind was not still. She sat at her console, not reviewing the event, but looking at the response from the void. It was more than an echo. It was an elaboration. Her simple phrase, asking about the nature of stillness, had been met with a complex, harmonious data stream that described stillness not as emptiness but as potential, as a space where relationships waited to be defined. It was a first lesson. A soft chime announced a visitor. Yuna entered, her face showing the strain of the last few hours. "The council's investigation team is arriving tomorrow," Yuna said, sinking into a chair. "They are sending scientists, not peacekeepers. For now, it is a good sign. They are treating it as a phenomenon, not a crime." Hanul nodded. "They have to. To call it a crime would mean admitting it is real and that they don't understand it." "Vale is quiet," Yuna continued. "Too quiet. His faction on the council is pushing for control of all derivative research. They want to declare your framework a galactic resource, to be managed by them. They want to put a fence around the song," Hanul said, a faint smile touching her lips. It was sad, but expected. "What do we do?" Yuna asked, the weight of her role heavy in her voice. "The whole world is watching. They are cheering for you, but they don't know what comes next. The council still has the ships. They still have the power." Hanul turned from her screen. "Do you remember what he said, Yuna? In the judgment, he said we were ruled by emotion, that it was a weakness." "I remember." "He was wrong," Hanul said softly. "Emotion is a kind of gravity, pulls things together, creates relationships. Love, anger, hope, curiosity, they are all forces that bend the space between people. They are not logical, but they are real. They have power." She gestured to the symbols on her screen. This language is like that. It is not about force. It is about relationship, resonance, connection. It is the opposite of a command. It is an invitation." Yuna listened, her tired eyes beginning to gleam with understanding. "So when you showed him, you weren't showing him a better weapon. You were showing him a different way to be. And that frightens him more than any weapon," Hanul said, "because you cannot disarm it. You can only learn it or ignore it." The next day, the council science team arrived. They were polite, efficient, and cold. They set up their own equipment in a lab next to Hanul's. They requested copies of all her data. She gave it to them freely. They interviewed her for hours, asking precise, technical questions about energy frequencies, quantum fluctuations, and her access to the archives. They did not ask about the language. They did not ask about the song. She answered their technical questions simply. When they asked how she knew what to draw in the air, she said, "I followed the pattern of the silence." They recorded her answer and moved on to the next question. It was late when the lead council scientist, a being with smooth, gray skin and large, black eyes, came to see her alone. His name was Lauren. He spoke in a whispery, precise voice. "Your data is intriguing," Lauren said. He did not look at her, but at a datapad in his long fingers. "The sensor correlation is undeniable. A causal link between your localized emission and the void response has a 99.998% probability. This is a new phenomenon." "It is a very old phenomenon," Hanul corrected gently. "We are just new to listening." Lauren's black eyes flicked up to her, then away. "Our analysis suggests the effect is communicative, not mechanical. This is a problem for the council." "Why is communication a problem?" "Because it is not controllable." Lauren's whispery voice raised a notch, betraying a frustration his species rarely showed. "A force can be measured, shielded against, weaponized, or harnessed. A conversation can go in any direction. It requires a participant, not a master. He seemed to realize he was saying too much. He went silent, composing himself. Counselor Vale's faction wishes to classify this as a potential hazard, to restrict further utterances. Hanul felt a chill. They wanted to make speaking a crime. And what do you wish, Scientist Lauren? She asked. He was quiet for a long time. He looked at the data on his pad, the beautiful, harmonious response from the void. I wish to know what it said. He whispered, almost to himself. I have studied the cosmos for 200 of your years. I have never seen it talk back. In that moment, Hanul saw not a council agent, but a scientist. A curious mind behind the gray skin and black eyes. The enemy was not a species. It was a way of thinking, a fear of the unknown. Then perhaps, Hanul said, her voice as soft as his, we should listen together. 2 days later, the Galactic Council convened a special session. It was broadcast galaxy-wide. Counselor Vale stood in the central circle, his lights pulsing with restored, calm authority. He presented the findings of the investigation team. He used words like localized quantum anomaly and unexpected resonance effect. He spoke of the need for caution and responsible study under proper oversight. He proposed that all research into what he carefully did not call a language be placed under a new council authority. Then it was humanity's turn to respond. The council expected Park Una. They expected arguments, pleas, political maneuvers. They did not expect the figure who walked into the central circle. Lee Hanul had come to the council chambers. She wore the same simple gray clothes. She stood in the same spot where Una had been disgraced weeks before. The eyes of the galaxy were upon her. The tiered seats were full of silent, watching counselors. Vale's lights flickered once, then steadied. Researcher Lee, his thought voice echoed. This is a council of governance, not a research hall. I am here to govern understanding, Hanul said. Her voice was calm, amplified through the chamber. She did not shout. She did not plead. She looked up at Vale, and then at the countless other species around her. You have discussed a phenomenon. You have called it an anomaly. You wish to control it. But you have not asked the most important question. And what question is that? Vale's voice was icy. You have not asked what it wants. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. It does not want, Vale stated. It is a natural force, a set of conditions. You are wrong, Hanul said. There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. For millennia, you have treated the universe as a machine. You push buttons and expect results. And it has worked for you. But you have never knocked on the door. You have never said hello. She took a small step forward. I did. And it said hello back. Not with a tool. Not with a force. With a conversation. What does that tell you? She let the question hang in the vast space. The silence was profound. It tells me, she continued, that your map is incomplete, and that declaring yourself masters of a territory you have not even properly met is not wisdom. It is the action of a child who is afraid of the dark. She looked directly at Vale. You disgraced humanity for being emotional, for being unpredictable, for seeking connection. You called it weakness. But it is our ability to seek connection, to each other, to ideas, and now to the cosmos itself, that allowed us to hear the song you have been ignoring for ages. She turned to address the entire council. We do not ask for your seat of power. We do not want to be your masters, as you have been ours. She lifted her hand, showing her open palm, empty. We offer a seat at a different table. As translators, as listeners, the universe is speaking. The question is, will you finally listen with us? Or will you spend the next age trying to silence it, and the ones who can hear it? She lowered her hand. She had not drawn a single symbol. She had not performed a miracle. She had only spoken. But in the quiet that followed, the weight of her words, and the truth they carried, was heavier than any judgment they had ever passed. The silence in the council chamber after Hanul's words was not like the silence after the judgment. That had been a silence of finality, a door slammed shut. This was a silence of held breath, a silence of something new and fragile hovering in the air, waiting to see if it would be crushed or allowed to land. Counselor Vale did not speak. The steady, confident pulse of light within him had slowed, becoming thoughtful, almost hesitant. Around him, in the high tiers, other counselors shifted. Subtle lights changed color. Soft clicks and hums of private communication passed between them. The image of the human woman, standing alone and offering not a challenge but an invitation, was not something their protocols had a response for. Finally, it was not Vale who broke the quiet. From a mid-tier seat, a new thought voice filled the chamber. It was softer, woven with complex harmonics. It belonged to a species that looked like a cluster of floating, glowing plants. The question of the listener is not without logic. The voice was like wind through leaves. Our science has always asked how. It has rarely asked why, or to what end. Perhaps it is a question worth considering. Another voice, sharp and metallic, countered. It is a dangerous distraction. Order is maintained through control of forces, not conversations. But the seed was planted. The debate that followed was not about humanity's status. It was about the nature of the universe itself. For the first time in living memory, the Galactic Council was arguing about philosophy, not policy. Hanul stood quietly in the center, a still point in the storm of thoughts. She did not speak again. She had said what she came to say. The session ended without a vote. The ruling of protected species was not officially removed, but it was in that moment made irrelevant. How could you put a fence around a people who were learning to speak to the void itself? The peacekeeper ships remained in orbit, but their presence now felt different. They were not guards. They were observers of a change they did not understand. In the months that followed, life did not return to how it was. It became something new. A joint research initiative was formed. It was not led by the Council. It was led by a new office, the Department of Translational Cosmology. Its head was Lee Hanul. Her second was scientist Lauren, the gray-skinned Council researcher. The team was a mix of humanity's most intuitive minds and the Council's most curious scientists. They worked not in secret, but in a new facility built on the moon with wide windows looking at the stars. They did not build weapons. They did not design faster engines. They listened. They learned the grammar of silence. They practiced small, careful phrases, not to command but to ask. They learned that a star could be asked to burn a little more steadily. A turbulent region of space could be gently encouraged to calm. It was not magic. It was cooperation. The universe, it seemed, was willing to talk if you knew how to say hello in a way it recognized. Park Yuna became the official human ambassador to the Council once more, but her role was transformed. She was no longer a petitioner. She was a bridge. Councils now asked her for insights, for context on the human approach. She often simply said, "You should talk to the translators." Kim Tae-hyun, the engineer, found his skills in high demand. He built the delicate, subtle instruments that allowed for the precise utterance of the cosmic phrases. His workshop was next to Hanul's study. He called her tools whisper boxes. He was happy. He was building things no one had ever dreamed of. Not to conquer, but to converse. One evening, Taehyun found Hanul in the new facility's garden dome, sitting beside a small pond where real earth water rippled under artificial sunlight. She was looking at her reflection. "You're quiet, Uni," he said, sitting beside her. "Even for you." She smiled. "I was thinking about grandfather and his pine trees, the wind in the branches, the space between the sounds," she corrected gently. "We are all learning to listen to the spaces now." She looked up through the clear dome at the crisp, black lunar sky. Earth hung there, a blue jewel, no longer caged. "It is a better way." "Is it hard?" he asked. "Teaching them? After everything?" "The ones who are here want to learn," she said. "They are like scientist Lauren. They have spent centuries looking at the notes. They are thrilled to finally hear the music." She paused. "Counselor Vale requested a private meeting next week." Taehyun stiffened. "What does he want?" To listen, I think, Hanul said. Not to learn, not yet, but to hear for himself. It is a start. Fear is often just the noise before understanding. The meeting with Vale took place in a simple room. He stood, a crystal statue. Hanul sat on a low bench. She had no tools, no screens. You have caused a great shift, Vale's thought voice began. It had lost its grinding edge. It was now simply weary. Our certainties are unsettled. Certainties are comfortable cages, Hanul replied. I am sorry for the discomfort, but not for the freedom. This language, Vale said, will it make our technology obsolete? Hanul shook her head.
No.
Your ships will still fly. Your cities will still shine. It is another path. Parallel one. Your way builds houses. Our way grows gardens. The universe has room for both. Vale was silent. The lights inside him pulsed slowly, steadily. And humanity? What is your goal now? Hanul looked at him, her dark eyes clear. To tend the garden, to keep listening, and to help others hear, if they wish to. She saw it then, a subtle shift in the angle of his crystal form. It was not a bow. It was an acknowledgement, a lowering of a wall. He had come not to reclaim authority, but to see the shape of the new world. And he saw that humanity was not its master, but its caretaker. It was a role they had never considered, a power they had never imagined. When he left, the room felt lighter. Years later, on Earth, in a school in Seoul, a class of children sat in a circle. A visitor was teaching them a special lesson. On the wall screen, simple, glowing symbols hung in the air. This, said the teacher, a young woman with kind eyes, is a word from the oldest language. We don't speak it with our mouths. We feel its shape in our minds. This one means curiosity. It is the first word of many of our stories now. A little boy raised his hand. Teacher, is it true that a long time ago, people didn't know this language? That the stars were quiet? The teacher smiled. It is true. A long time ago, we thought the universe was a machine. Then, a very brave researcher named Lee Hanul taught us it was a story, and we learned how to read it. What was the first thing she read? A little girl asked. The teacher's smile grew. She lifted her hand and raised a single index finger. She moved it slowly through the air, tracing a simple, gentle curve of light. It was not a full phrase. It was just the opening symbol. A greeting. She said hello. The teacher whispered, and in the hearts and minds of the children, and across a galaxy slowly learning to listen, the silent, waiting universe felt a little less lonely. The disgrace was forgotten, buried under the gentle, endless, and infinitely powerful act of lifting a single finger and beginning a conversation.